Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Perceptive podcast series here on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. We have another developer interview lined up this week as we're going to be talking about the Kickstarter project for the game Project Bubblegum by Emerald City Games. As of the time of this recording, by the time you're watching this live on the channel, the Kickstarter is kind of in the middle of its running. And we have two members of the studio here to talk about the game, kind of what their goal, their plans for the Kickstarter. So please welcome to our discussion, Gabi and Eric. How are the two of you doing today?
We're doing fine. Hi, Josh. First of all, thank you so much for this opportunity for us to talk about the game. It's recently a public thing, so it's really nice to talk about it with other people. I'm Gabi. I'm the lead game designer on the project. And
yeah, I'm Eric. I'm the lead programmer on the project, and yeah, appreciate you having us on.
Not a problem. And for any developers watching this, as always, if you would like to come on and talk about your games, the craft of game design, or anything else, please reach out. I am always here for chat. But we have something special for our discussion today, as the two of you and your studio are currently in the middle of a Kickstarter for the game Project Bubblegum. So, to get the ball rolling, can you tell everyone watching, what is kind of the elevator pitch? What is Project Bubblegum about?
Project Bubblegum is a epic space adventure where you can play with up to 3 friends as anthropomorphic space rangers. It's at heart a beat 'em up inspired on the old arcades and some of the new releases such as Castle Crashers and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Shredder's Revenge. But we wanted to bring more of the 3D aspect to combats and line of sight and some of this more modern aspects, and such as with platforming and also some puzzles elements and some of the fighting game combo feel.
Yeah, I'd maybe add on to that. I kind of like to think about it as Zootopia meets Guardians of the Galaxy
Yes.
in terms of vibe.
And for people watching this right now, how long has the game been in development for? How long has the studio been working on it?
So this project is actually has been discussed for a very long time. It's on its 3-year mark, but it started with a very small group with a few developers, and it started growing for the demo that we did for Gamescom to show publishers. But for most of the project, it was about 6 people doing some experimentations with the vision of the game and how it was supposed to feel. And then we pulled together a bigger group from the company. So a little bit about the company. We are currently 70 developers from all around the world, and we have a big art team in the studio. So the art team kind of switched project to project. Mm-hmm. So it's essentially 20 people added to the project for the game, for the demo. But yeah, this has been the pre-production of Bubblegum.
Right.
Yeah, three years total from the idea's initial genesis, and then it's been it was a slow burn for a long time, and then it's been about a year that it's been the focus of the studio.
All right. And for people watching us right now, for both of you, what's kind of your backgrounds in game dev?
You want to start?
Yeah, I can start. So I'm a Emerald City veteran. I've been here for just over a decade and kind of watched this company grow from the basement into the nice office that we've got here now in Burnaby, British Columbia. So that's been a wild ride and a super fun journey to be a part of. Before that, I got into the industry in console development originally, working at Radical Entertainment, which sadly is no longer around, but I worked on Prototype 2, which some folks might remember, and then joined Emerald City to kind of experience the whole startup thing, and I've been doing that ever since. And so, I feel like a lot of the Emerald City group comes from a console development background originally, so while we've been doing mobile games for most of the last 10 years, everything we've done has been very animation driven, very much trying to push performance and what we can do visually on the hardware still. So we've still kind of been doing console style development for a long time, I would say, and the whole studio is like very stoked to get back to the platforms where we play the most games. So Bubblegum's really exciting to us in that sense. And Gabby's newer addition, but super talented, and happy to have her on the team.
Thank you. I've been in the company for a year and a half, and as Eric said, I'm actually new to the gaming industry in general. So I joined the company as a junior game designer about a year and a half ago, right after school. So I graduated from Vancouver Film School before joining ECG. And yeah, we knew ECG as like a amazing graphics game studio for mobile. And when I joined, I was really surprised that we were working on Bubblegum and a console project, and it was very interesting, challenging from the beginning. Through this year and a half, I got really familiar with the project and tested a lot of things and wrote a lot of stuff about the game and talked to a lot of these amazing developers that we have here, and ended up being promoted to combat designer and then to lead designer.
All right, great. So with the Project Bubblegum, again, like for people watching, it's going to be a very beat 'em up, couch co-op, online co-op focused game. What kind of like attracted the studio to work on this as kind of like the next big project? Because as the two of you were saying, like Emerald City's been working on a lot of like mobile style games, a lot of stuff like that. So what was kind of the appeal of Project Bubblegum to be like the next big thing?
So there's a few different aspects to why the company wanted to do this game. I wasn't an edit from the start, so I got the ball a little bit running, but from what I know, it's first of all, a genre that a lot of people really love here. We have a lot of combat enthusiasts and people that play games with their families. We have a lot of parents that like to play games with their children, and just like people who live for games and play with their friends. So the idea started with something that the company really loved. And there was this challenge of trying to make the 3D environment really impact the game and show off really well for a game that normally is 2D and a half, kind of like you walk back and forth, but the gameplay is mostly one plane there. And yeah, so it was a mix of we really love this game. We see that people really want to play games with their friends. And we want to make a game that people want to play together and can have an easy time joining. And we like a challenge, I guess.
Yeah, totally. I would say that we always try to make games that we would want to play ourselves. So usually any project starts with a genre that someone on the team has a strong connection to. So yeah, this is a throwback to a lot of the old school beat 'em ups that the team was really fond of, but updated in like a much more modern package, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And speaking about like combat and beat 'em up design, that is a topic I could spend like the next like 2-3 hours on easily. And I guess to kind of like carry on with that point, with Project Bubblegum from like a combat standpoint, like for people watching this right now, again, you mentioned of course TMNT Shredder's Revenge. We've seen Streets of Rage 4. There's been a slew of indie beat 'em ups over the past decade. What kind of like has been like in terms of combat design? What's been kind of the focus of that for Project Bubblegum?
I guess the first focus for Bubblegum in general, and combat included, is how it feels to hit enemies.
Mm-hmm.
So we were really like delving into the feedback and how to get each hit feeling unique. But we had a lot of discussions over combos and how to approach this. And there is like just two branches of combos that we were kind of going back and forth, which is what I like to call an indirect combo, which is kind of Brawlhalla and Smash Bros style, which you have the directional attacks. And a sequence of those directional attacks have better results, but it's not necessarily like a Street Fighter. You press a sequence of buttons that result in something different.
Mm-hmm.
And the Street Fighter branch with all the buttons and like special abilities that look really awesome and really satisfying to do. So we are thinking of approaching this with a mix. So there are attacks that you can do with a sequence. The most basic one is the light combo. That is just you press the light attack. and at the end of this combo, you can push enemies away with it.
Mhm.
But we want to expand on that, and we have currently directional charged attacks that you can launch enemies in the air or push them away or hit an area. So it was a lot about this playfulness of combat on how like you can feel right and do what you intend to do without too much work from the player at first.
Yeah, I would definitely double down on the game feel thought as to where the design kind of started. I mean the genre is called beat 'em up. So if it's not satisfying to beat up your enemies, then you don't have much. So it's just starting in a sandbox level, feeling how the hits feel, running around, locomoting, and gym scenes, seeing how the turns feel, the skids feel, jumping up and down and off things feels, trying to get everything as tight as possible. So when you pick up the controls, you just understand what to do immediately, and when you're playing it well, you're rewarded with good feedback.
I think we really leaned into the Bushnell's rule of like easy to learn, hard to master. You want to get it. As soon as someone sits down, they can have a satisfying experience. But if they want to keep going further, we want to have room for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we thought about that a lot in terms of controls. Like if you can't pick up the controller and figure out what buttons to press, then it's probably not an input scheme that we would want to go for. But there can still be depth there. Like once you've been playing hours into the game, then more complicated sequences, stuff like that, become available to you. But just the pick up and play nature of it was super important to us, especially for a couch co-op game, right, where you just have friends over, your family, or whoever's around. You want to be able to just hand them the controller and they just understand what to do right away.
Mm-hmm. And I was looking on the Kickstarter page for it, and one thing that I saw is that you have kind of like a co-op combos as well, where like characters can actually do tag team moves. And kind of like, what is that about in the game?
That is something that I absolutely adore from the game idea. So essentially, we have a system of hit states where certain hits will result on some actions that the enemies will take. So they can get stunned or be thrown at the floor or be in the air. And those states generate openness like for other like group attacks. So the one that there is in the Kickstarter page, you throw an enemy in the floor, and then someone else can join because they are in that state. And we also want to have joint abilities, so things that the team can decide to do together from their attacks. We want to really make this like co-op fight, like I'll send an enemy to you, you send it back to me kind of thing. A few of our favorite moments playing together were like launching someone in the air, and then the other player goes to the air and starts attacking them, and then like they fall down together and finish the enemy. It's a very fun thing to play with two people or four or three. Like any kind of co-op situation is really interesting to fight with.
Yeah, I think successful co-op gameplay is always about the players interacting with each other, not playing 4 single-player experiences on the same couch.
Yep. And with kind of like the feel of the combat, as you were talking about, one thing that we've seen from a lot of like more like recent beat-em-ups is kind of like more of the, I guess, like comboing or kind of like keeping the enemy in the air kind of system, and that's always been one of the things that has been like I think a limitation of like older beat-em-ups, where the enemies once they're in the air, you can't really do anything until they hit the ground. So with kind of like carrying it over, and even like with the idea of like having the co-op play, how does like that feel for Project Bubblegum? Like when you have like 4 players on the screen, all doing their own thing at the same time.
It's so funny that you asked that. We had like this discussion with the team when we started introducing air combat. Because essentially, if you launch someone in the air and you're just like Devil May Cry style, just like comboing that guy alone and raising up those combos and doing all these things, you're essentially playing by yourself. And we wanted to make air combat something that you could do with friends. and something that you could like send enemies to other people and they could catch them in the air, or you can just like jump at the same time. But we didn't want to have everyone isolated, so we limited the time you can keep enemies in the air. So they start falling, and you can see that quite like clearly when they start falling. And you can intercept them in the air. And there's a lot of attacks that you bring them to the floor too. So you can like bring them to your friend, send them to your friend, join them in the air, or fight a little bit by yourself.
I think the other interesting challenge for us was our camera is slightly more top down than a lot of other games in the genre. So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to get these juggling moments to read well. So if you're at the front of the screen, for example, and you hit a guy up in the air and your friend is fighting towards the back of the level, how do we manage that clutter, which was extra challenging for us compared to some of the other games that we were looking at.
The camera had a lot of challenges with combat, like even stuff like movement. You look and it looks like without adjustments, it looks like they move so much slower on the Z-axis than on the X-axis.
Yeah.
And there's so many adjustments. Like, I'm a huge GDC and Game Maker's Toolkit fan, and we had so much inspiration from these two channels. And like, there is a platforming toolkit from Game Maker's Toolkit that like you're tweaking the numbers and kind of seeing how it goes. And when we added the third dimension to that, like, it's so many things that we were kind of taking for granted at first that had so many like extra challenges and a lot of opportunity to improve and make new things too.
Yeah, I don't know how deep we want to go on the camera because you really can. I mean, I spent I think like 2 months straight just working on camera, which is funny because if you look at any of the video, like the camera just looks very regular to you, right? But the thing about camera is when it's right, you don't notice it, and when it's wrong, you really notice it. So, but yeah, one of the interesting tricks we do that Gabi mentioned is we have a perspective camera, like the game's not isometric, which really helps emphasize the 3D aspect of it, which I think we're pushing more than any other game that I've seen in the genre. So it celebrates that a little more to have FOV, but it's very narrow to still kind of give you a more classic beat 'em up feel. Like there's not a lot of perspective, there's just enough, and this very narrow FOV makes it so that when you're moving on like the depth axis, like the Z axis in Unity, your movement speed feels very different than the X axis. So we actually changed the move speed of characters on the Z axis. You're actually running in that axis faster than you would be horizontally.
Yes.
Which feels good, again, getting back to game feel, but in terms of character AI and locomotion, like programmatically, it's actually a very annoying thing to handle.
Then you add the jumps and the jetpack movement and the platforming, and everything becomes like this tweak. But it's that if it's partially on Z, if it's like on X, and it was definitely like a lot of work put into it. And even for the enemies, like this camera, Eric kind of worked out an entire system for enemies to like perceive the floor and the ambient around them in a way that the players could understand it clearly too. And it was like watching a masterpiece when it started working out. It was so impressive.
And I wrote a book on platforming design. I've spoken to developers before, and yeah, the camera in these games can always be a nightmare. And to kind of build off what the two you're talking about, as one of the things I wanted to ask you about, in terms of like clarity when it comes to the combat, that's always another challenge of just about any 2D, 3D game, let alone a beat 'em up. What hasn't been done, or like what were kind of like the thoughts in terms of making sure that everything was readable? Because again, you have 4 characters, you can have up to like 4 different kinds of combat encounters happening on a single screen. And I guess, just to clarify for people watching, does the entirety of Project Bubblegum take place on a single screen, or can like characters will go like split screen at all during gameplay?
I think you can take this question.
Yeah, single screen. So everything takes place on one screen, and so that's where a lot of the camera complications come in. Is we still want to give the 4 players a pretty wide range of motion. So as characters run to the edge of the screen, then we'll actually zoom out up to some maximum bound so the battlefield can get bigger or smaller. And then we'll also make sure that we always keep all the enemies within the maximum screen bounds. So the screen bounds actually become walls essentially, so that the enemies that you're fighting are not allowed outside of those bounds. So that's where a lot of the tricks were, and then plus the verticality that you mentioned from the platforming is an additional challenge, because then we have all the same issues but on the y-axis to try to keep the party in frame, and if somebody falls, like what do we do, and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, we're keeping everybody on one screen,
which led to a new combat challenge for us that was what happened when you throw enemies in the edge.
Yeah.
And we tried essentially 3 approaches. We ended up choosing one of them, but like you could just send enemies out of the edge and they would run back to the combat. You could bounce them off the wall, the imaginary wall of the camera, or you could they could just hit and fall down. We found that the hit and fall down was very satisfying to see. Just squish in the wall. But yeah, that was a whole bunch of work too to get how enemies behave about with this camera walls.
Yeah, I think readability wise, we could probably talk a little bit about what we did with hits, since again, beat 'em up hits is kind of the one, arguably the most important thing to read well when you're beating guys up. Yeah, I don't know if you want to go over all the techniques that we used on the the flashes and the different things.
Oh yeah. So there was actually a list of feedback things that we went through and tested. So one that had a lot of conversation topics was the hit stop. So when you hit the character, both the enemy and the player stop a little bit, which was interesting at first. Oh, it's really strong, it's really cartoonish. And then the other enemies are still moving and the other players are still moving, they can still attack you. So we had to balance the right amount that you can see it and have this impact feeling without making it a disadvantage for the player. There was the flash. So every time that you hit an enemy, it flashes, and it has a hit effect, and has a being hit effect. So the weapon has an effect, the character has an effect, and we had so much work and thought put into the hit reactions, and how we made a list of everything that it could kind of result from attacks. So we started with stagger, stun, float, which sending enemies in the air, and throw. And we had to add more layers about small throws and big throws, and if they hit other things, when they hit other enemies, and what each of them would result. And we ended up adding flinch and scratch too. So when you hit an enemy with a small attack, you would see that he got hit. So all of the effects would still go, but they wouldn't stop moving. So to increase challenge of a few enemies and decrease how powerful some weapons were. Or something that if you do a really powerful attack that you're coming from the air and falling in the middle of the sky, of the floor, hitting a whole bunch of enemies, a few of them could feel the impact without actually receiving damage. So if we added a lot of thought to how they react to each attack to increase readability, and there was custom animations for each of them, and all these effects and all this code put into it, and it's really satisfying now.
Yeah, I would say the big ones is hit stop, hit flash, which is a full body shader effect on the character that you're hitting. Particle systems at the impact point, like Gabi mentioned, we do both. If you're slashing with a plasma sword, then there's a plasma effect, and if you're chopping, that's.
Sorry, let me.
Okay, we're good. We just have automatic lights in here. We're sitting too still, I guess. So if you're chopping with a plasma sword, you get a little pop from the plasma sword. But then if you're hitting a robot, then we want to make sparks and metal bits. Versus if you're hitting a lizard, then we get lizard blood as well. So there's potentially 2 particle systems playing. And then you have hit animation as well, which we try to sync up with the hit stop to look nice. And then the other tricky part is, so we added all those hit reactions that Gabi mentioned, but occasionally you have like uninterruptible enemies, like the larger bruiser elite class of character. So these enemies you don't want to play a full body stagger reaction on, so you can just unlock them to death. They have to be able to continue doing what they're doing. So we came up with a flinch hit reaction, which is it doesn't interrupt the character, but we layer an additive animation over top. So you'll see their head like snapping back or something like that while they're still trying to play their attack animation or run towards you. So you're still getting that feedback. And the last little trick that we do behind this scenes is God of War calls this hit suck, which is, I don't know, it's a weird name, but we'll roll with that. So we, based on the character, we know kind of their ideal enemy position to fight them. So maybe from the edge of my capsule, it'd be like a meter in front of me is where the enemy's going to look nicest. So again, the player can read that we're the trade of blows. But a lot of times when you're navigating this 3D space, you'll have these big clumps, and the player will move too close to an enemy or whatever situation emerges. So as you're beating up the character, we'll actually start sucking them towards this ideal point. So by the end of the combo, you get like the most readable position of the enemy character relative to the player character.
Yeah.
And when you're playing, you can't really notice that this is happening under the hood. But again, it just helps making all those blows way more readable to have this distancing.
I think that also leads to a whole like player assist route that we had to take. Like most games, and especially like platformers, sometimes things are not perfectly clear, and you can have more than one interpretation. Even like with all the feedback and all the like clarity that we could add, and for that to become a little bit easier for the player, like sometimes we approach players from the enemies. We have things like coyote time and jump buffer that allow you to like jump a little bit easy and even like jump after you start falling. So there's a lot of like helping the readability to exist even out of like normal one enemy against a player getting like creating hits.
And like to that point, like one trap I see from a lot of beat 'em ups is this issue where if the player's optimal range for punching is shorter than the enemy's optimal range, there's this case where the player will go to attack, it will whiff, and the enemy will just kind of start their combo, and the player can't really like get in. And it's something that I see from a lot of like action games and like 2D style games where it's one of the things where it's supposed to be a challenge, and the player supposed to always know I always need to walk like one step more than I would think to start punching, but it really does like lead to the combat feeling weird. And I guess like to throw that as a question for both of you, I am sure that as you and the rest of the team have worked on Project Bubblegum, you've obviously have studied and played a lot of action games, a lot of beat 'em ups, 2D, 3D, the whole deal. Any like insights or any thoughts on how do you get that feel right? Because again, like as the two of you were saying, especially with the camera, it's one of those things that for most people they're not thinking about. They're not thinking about how the camera's probably displayed, whether or not the animations are connecting or they feel right. But they will know for sure if a game is like wrong. Like it's like one of those things like you get behind a car and if you try to turn the wheel and it doesn't do anything, people will notice. So what has been kind of like the research or like what has been done in terms of like understanding how do you get that feel to work in an action game?
Yeah, I don't mind to go first on this one because I worked on this exact topic like a lot actually. So again, we're like everything has to be catered to the camera, especially in a game like this that has such a strong fixed camera. Like you have to play to that, especially with such a narrow FOV. So exactly like you mentioned, there's a lot of situations where from in a player's head they would be like, I should be hitting this enemy. But if you actually look at the simulation in the game engine, they're actually not that close to the enemy, especially on that Z, the depth axis, like we mentioned. So we'll do a lot of things. Like for example, we have a hitbox that is very wide. So it's very wide on the depth axis. So because it's very difficult to align yourself perfectly on the Z axis with the character that you're trying to fight, it's hard for players to sense that depth. Horizontally, they have a really good feeling for like how far am I away from this guy. But on this axis, it's a lot harder for them to figure it out. We have a super forgiving hitbox on that axis. And then we actually ended up developing like a 2-tier hitbox, because the other problem that we were running into is when there was just one enemy on the screen and you were trying to align yourself with them, it could be very frustrating. But if we gave you this very forgiving hitbox, then suddenly if you're fighting a group of enemies, you could catch them all in this massive hitbox and just like combo them all down. So we would do like a first pass hitbox to try to find at least one character for you to hit. And then we would do a second pass. And if you were going to hit multiple characters, we would use a smaller hitbox so that we didn't create this thing of like comboing down all the enemies. So that was one of the tricks that we did is these different styles of hitboxes that cater to our camera. And then the other big thing is we do a lot of step forward as well. So when you press the attack button and you're slightly out of range and you're about to whiff, we anticipate who you want to hit, and we step the character towards that enemy during the animation to help get you to where you're trying to go. So we'll do some target detection and figure out, okay, this is probably the character that you want to be attacking, and if you're slightly out of range, then we'll step forward during the antic for your attack, and with that forgiving hitbox, then hopefully you'll get there. So all those things working together makes it so that like you don't appreciate any of this when you're just mashing the X button. We're doing like a lot of stuff under the hood so that the guy that you're trying to beat up, you're beating them up.
Yeah, and that system that you guys created gave us such design power to make every attack really special. So as mentioned in the Kickstarter page, we have these unique characters with unique weapons, and we wanted to make the attacks and the combos to feel different and to feel more powerful or less powerful when you compare them to each other. And like quicker or have a bigger range and this kind of things. So having this multi-tiered hitbox and that you can control per attack and create your own like adjustments for each of them is like essentially it gave us the power to quickly make this weapon that you can have like multi-target and limit the amount of targets that you can have, and this like wide swing while we have this really quick like gauntlet attack that hits one guy but it hits it really fast. And like all of those controls were really available for us, and it was like it made creating this weapon such a creative experience that was really like interesting to try out. And we had like versions of the weapons of like, okay, if we hit a little bit further, if we hit more enemies, less enemies, and if the animation is a little bit more to the center or more like swing like, and like it gave us so much power to do cool things with the weapons.
It's nice to hear when all the code pays off like that.
Definitely did.
Yep. And yeah, like as the two are saying, like one of those like challenges when it comes to like this kind of beam up design is that idea that the player's just going to be mashing X or Y, whatever the move you're trying to do, and if it doesn't feel good, again we've used feel a lot in this conversation. It is important to mention this because it is such a very wide difference. And again, like for people watching, like this for the first time, like I have played more platformers, more beat-em-ups, more action games than I think I can remember these days. And it is such a very wide gulf between bad, good, and really fantastic, that kind of game feel to it. And for beat-em-up in particular, if that first punch doesn't feel right, if that first, enemy combo you hit on someone doesn't, like, pop in front of the player, you kind of, like, lose that magic. And with Project Bubblegum, as you're saying, like, you have different moves. I kind of want to talk a bit more about, like, the general move set, probably in, like, the next few minutes. But what has it been like? You've been, of course, talking about this. How has it been trying to, or let me rephrase this. what has been done in terms of like as like iteration on the project, in terms of like how the feel has evolved? Because I'm sure this is not something that the team just figured out like very first iteration. It was perfect, like because as I was talking to both of you before we started this cast, a lot of the people who watch my stuff is kind of like developers, people trying to work on their first games. What has been kind of like the process of getting Project Bubblegum to the state that it is, in terms of like refining the feel of it?
A lot of trial and error and gameplay sessions with the team and with people that were invited to test it. So, like, a lot of iteration and many times, like, I spent this like entire afternoon, this entire week doing something, and it feels amazing. That's it. I got it. And then I showed it to other people, and they couldn't even like understand what is happening. And then sometimes you like get in a group of like a room full of people, and you're discussing the idea, just like, I think that's it, and you try it, and it actually feels good. And as you said, there's such a wide range, and not only between like bad, good, and fantastic, even within the fantastic. Like if you think Mario movement versus Super Meat Boy movement, both fantastic games with completely different tuning and feel to them. And like, God of War combat versus Devil May Cry combat. Great, and it's so satisfying to use that X on God of War and like strike, and you see the X going through, while if you like play Virgil and you move your katana, and like 20 hits appear in front of you, hitting all the enemies, and it's not so much of like a flash connection, but like they're both brilliant and they've passed different feels to them. So it's not only like how to make the feel great, but which great feel do we actually want? And it has like, we had many great iterations that we just looked at it and like, it works great by itself. It doesn't work great in the game. And like we can go more and more about the process itself, but my main take from this is try and try again and show it early. Like if you have a very rough version, bring it to the team, talk to them, explain. Like if you have to make like a presentation before showing because it doesn't really get exactly where you want, but it shows the idea, that's the time to show it. Like have other people look at it and share the information, and more than one person, and get everything written down from the feedback and try to find the common ground in the feedback and where it could be coming from.
Yeah, I would just absolutely double down on the whole the concept of iteration. Like our processes at Emerald City on everything is actually extremely iterative. We try to play test early and often, and I mean, there's no way you can work on field without playtesting constantly. Yep. I think for us, the challenge for any team who has a very iterative approach is it's not very planning friendly, in the sense of when you're like, when will this be done? And it's like, I don't know. When it feels good. When will it feel good? Maybe in 2 iterations, maybe in 100 iterations. We don't know. So I think as the team grew, there like one of the challenges with this approach is making sure that we're iterating in a good direction rather than iterating around in circles, and then sometimes you just end up back where you used to be and you're like, didn't we try that version already? Which is never a good feeling. So yeah, since bringing Gabi onto the team and more people, then I feel like we did a much better job of iterating towards a vision of like what Bubblegum could be. And then that, as long as you're iterating in the good direction, then this approach becomes very, very powerful, because you see the polish that it brings if you play the demo and all the movements, all the hits, all that kind of stuff.
It's nice to hear.
Yep. And again, we could spend, I could easily spend 3 to 5 hours just like talking on just like beat 'em up and action-based design. So I'm trying to resist the urge just to keep like throwing more, because there is more to talk about. And one thing I wanted to ask both of you about, because we really didn't talk about this yet, because it also relates to the action design, is kind of like the basic kit of what a player or what a character can do. And I also want to ask you, ask both of you about a little bit about the character designs, like in the next few minutes. But in terms of like the basic actions that a player can do, like we've kind of been talking a lot about the overall feel, how combat works, but a major aspect of any combat system is what you can give or what the player has access to. And I wanted to, for both of you, if you could kind of like clarify or talk a little bit about what are like the full range of options that a player has. You know, light attack, heavy attack, dodge, all that.
Yeah, that was something that we took our time figuring out every single aspect. And it was an other layer because having more characters meant that we also had to like think of what would be unique and what would be like general for all of them and how to make all of these things cohesive and feel like similar while still unique. But we got to this like really strong core mechanics for all the characters that we really like and plus like make a lot of interesting gameplay possibilities available for us. So essentially, all characters have a light attack, a charged attack, their normal jump and dodge, and a jetpack. And within the charged attack and the light attack, there is the directional variance for some of them, mostly on the charge, but that might vary. Like the combos themselves can vary through the characters. And yeah, the light attack, as you mentioned, a lot of the people that play the game, especially when they are just joining, were essentially just pressing X, just attacking. So that was like our main focus. We're like once we figured that out, the rest could branch from that. But the light attack needed to be well-rounded and feel good. So feel good. Another time that we mentioned feel, but responsive and like with good feedback and with like the right damage, right comparisons to the rest. So the light attack was our start point. From that we layered the charged attack and how long was the charged attack, how much stronger was the charged attack, the directional charged attacks and what each of them would do to each tier of enemy. So we kind of separated the enemies into like these categories to think about how they would react to the attacks. Then there was the jump, and one of our big like initial questions when I joined was, do characters have different jumps? And it sounds super interesting, and it fits our puzzle part of the game really well, but we also want players to be free to pick the characters that they want to play with. Mm-hmm. So we decided to make the jump height the same, while the speed and how it looks can vary, because when a bear jumps versus the mouse jumps, like mouse is gonna look like it's jumping beautifully, while the bear is gonna be like chunky and not so high, but because of their different heights, they're gonna reach the same point, which allows us to make a lot of like level decisions that are for everyone playing the game. And within the jump, there is the edge grab mechanic that you can grab edges and move around them to facilitate platforming and also generate some new platforming abilities. So before, you would like only be able to land on platforms that completely fit you. And now you can grab to the sides of them and move around in the level until you reach that platform. So that's part of the basic kit, even though there's not a button to grab. And jetpack, it was an eternal iteration almost, but we got to something that we really, really liked. So you like go a little bit up and then you start falling. So it's almost like a glider. A lot of the good inspirations for that came from glider mechanics, such as like Breath of the Wild, you get a wind and then you start falling, but faster and snappy. So that it fits on that super fast kind of like experience with the combat and everyone moving around and the 4 players. So that was the base kit. And I would include moving, just walking around in the base kit, because there's a lot to it and like how precise it needs to be, both for the platforming and the combat. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the most interesting parts of our base kit, at least for me, just to underscore a couple of the points that Gabi mentioned, is our X button, or your main attack button, has this kind of unique combo system where you can fluidly combo lights, and then you hold the button for a little bit longer to charge and throw your heavy, and that kind of has this real interesting feel where you're not stuck in this like rigid 3-hit combo, like 1, 2, 3, and then like a little cooldown, and then 1, 2, 3. It's like you can be beating a guy up, and then you can throw that heavy whenever you see a window, or if you have the opportunity, you can keep spamming the heavy again and again and again. Or you can, so that has a real unique feel to it. And then I think the other thing is putting the jetpack in the base kit is actually like quite different, but it was another game feel thing where we just liked playing with it so much. We're like, this game's in the future. Why not just everyone has a jetpack all the time? It's just more fun to have a jetpack than to have to jump around.
Also, on that alternation of the light and charge, our light and charge also include our ranged weapon. So every character has a melee weapon and a ranged weapon. And those light and charge have happen for both, so you can even alternate between your light attack, your melee light attack, your charged light attack, your light attack from your gun, your ranged light attack, and then from the gun charge attack, we have 2 possibilities. That some guns will charge and like a big shot that explodes, while some of them will enter rapid fire mode. So if you hold it, it starts firing faster and faster, which is like part of the core too. Is just that one varies more character by character.
Mm-hmm. And regarding the charge attack, that was a point I wanted to ask both of you about. Like, another thing that I see in a lot of beat-em-ups is that the charge attack is sometimes like so slow that you have to kind of like set up maybe like 3 to 5 seconds before the enemy gets to you, or it's always considered like the most overpowered attack. I've played plenty of action games where basically the whole strategy is just charge heavy, slam enemy, repeat for many times it takes to hit them. Well, I guess like with like getting that feel right in terms of balancing light and heavy attacks, what was kind of like the challenge of that, and especially like in relation to the enemy designs? You mentioned earlier having like elite style enemies, like enemies I'm sure you can't just like light attacks will not hit stun them. What's been like the balance of like the different attacks in relation to the enemy designs?
I think for us, we actually spent. Well, okay, so one thing about our heavy is because it's a charge, it's naturally like a little bit harder to pull off, whereas other games will have, Y button and it throws your heavy, and it's just a press, and so then you're really at the mercy of like tuning that antic so specifically to make the risk reward good. Whereas for us, as soon as you start charging the X button, we don't let you move anymore. You can flip your facing to change where you throw it. But that was always a little bit more balanced for us with our approach. But we battled mostly X button spam being overpowered. That was like our main fight, because we spent so much time making this light attack that feels great to beat guys up with. People grab the controller and they just start hitting X X X X X X X. So I think balance-wise, the challenge for us was more how do we break up the X button spam and give you incentive to actually press other buttons on the controller.
So our charge attack charges relatively fast with the sword. There's our main template weapon right now. It changed with the other weapons, and it is really strong. It currently is 6 times the damage of a light attack, and so 2 to 12, and it does charge relatively fast, but it stops your movement. And as you mentioned, we wanted to give this like rock, paper, scissors feel to some of the attacks. So a light enemy will be staggered by like one normal attack. The elite ones would like even a charge attack might not stagger them. And so you're stuck there, you attack, and you're trading hits at that point, and you're trading a heavy hit. So you deal a lot of damage and you receive a lot of damage, and it's a lot of this choice of when to release an attack, when to do a light attack and run. And I feel that it's going to be very dependent on the characters too. So while Kali, our assassin character will be very focused on escaping, so her charge attacks might be easier to pull even against an elite enemy. She's gonna deal a little bit less damage and less reactions. While Valhalla, our bear, our tank, like it's gonna be, she has to get that big hammer and hit an enemy with it, but like it's gonna be very rewarding to do so. So you can kind of pick and choose your playstyle of the different characters.
Unfortunately, Eric had to run, and again, like we'll be here for like 10 to 15 hours, so we just keep talking Bubblegum and action design. But Gabi is still with us, and we still got more to talk about with Project Bubblegum. So I guess to keep going with what we were just saying in terms of kind of combat, and especially with balancing this with the different enemies. One thing that I want to go back to a few minutes ago regarding the melee and the range. Is there any kind of, I guess, like limitations between just spamming your melee attack versus spamming your range? Like, are there certain situations where the player would be maybe like implicitly punished for just saying, I'm just going to use my gun for this entire encounter versus I'm going to just use my punch for the entire encounter?
I wouldn't say explicitly punished. We did want to make the game very accessible and fit different play styles. So it would be not so much as a punish as you have to adjust your gameplay. So, for example, I want to just shoot. I love my ranged weapon and I want to keep shooting at everyone. You're going to have to move around. Like, it's not going to deal as much damage, or like if you're shooting with the pistol, for example, it's not going to deal as much damage. But I can move around. And I can move around even holding because the pistol is a rapid fire. So if an enemy that is heavy and like elite type of enemy is approaching you, you're gonna have to move around and like try to escape and shoot and dodge. Like choosing to just stick to one play style might make you have to like make other things to fit that, while being more flexible with how you react to each situation will give you more advantages. But you absolutely can. I just want to light attack. That's the only thing I want to do. I want to go there and light attack. You might receive a little bit more damage. You might be a little bit like limited on what you can actually do, as we discussed, like the hit reactions, the air combat, like putting an enemy down so that other players can join. That might not be possible with the light attack, but you can still go through a level with a basic attack.
All right. And one other point, as you were talking about combat, I didn't mention that it just like popped in my head. The idea of recovery frames, or being able to kind of cancel out animations. This is something that is, again, like very extensive in action design, and it's one of those things that when it doesn't quite work in any kind of beat-em-up gameplay, you really feel it. So with Project Bubblegum, what has it been, or like what's been the decision regarding being able to do, like, is there any kind of animation canceling? And if so, like, I guess, like, how apparent is there? Like, how, like, readily can the player do it?
There is animation canceling, and it was something that we experimented with at first. And I think, like, my point of view as the designer that just joined, like, at first I didn't give the value that it actually had. I thought it was a bit like, oh yeah, if you light attack, you cancel, like, everybody knows that, just let's continue. And then I actually stopped to think about it myself, and it was like this humbling moment. Like, I actually have to have a diagram and start thinking of all those possibilities, because it makes a lot of difference, and a lot of players are looking for that like animation cancel moment, and it enters a bit on that like easy to learn, hard to master. We really want players that want to learn those things, like have the room to improve and know exactly when this happens. So we made this diagram of what actions can actually cancel which actions, and partial cancels or full cancels. So, like, if you're gonna finish, we divided most of the animations into a in portion when you're just starting, a release portion, the main part of the animation, and then an out, so like the recovery frames. So some actions can cancel the recovery frames, while some actions will cancel the entire thing. So if you're charging an attack and you shoot, depending on your weapon, mostly on like the sword and the pistol example, you might just shoot instead and release your charge attack. You had to move and you felt like you're in an unsafe location to do a charge attack, and you're not going to do the release and the recovery. You were just in the in. So each part of the animations have their own canceling.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, like getting that again, like as we've been saying, feel for this entire conversation, it is such a hard thing to do because again, like the goal, like for anyone watching this, like ultimately the goal of a good beat 'em up, a good action game is that the player should feel like they are 100% in control of their character. Like if they try, like if they're trying to get out of the way of an attack, but the animation has no recovers, or they're like still charging up, and the enemy is just standing there, like he's just lifting up his sword, and the player can't do anything about it. It's going to feel horrible to them. Like that's like one of the worst things when they know what to do, but they can't get the character to like get out of the way or something is stopping them. And again, like this is the kind of stuff like for people watching, like we're like talking about things like this is happening in like milliseconds in terms of gameplay. If you can't get this right, it just again really robs a game of any chance of keeping someone wanting to play it.
Yeah, and about that escape thing on the diagram, and we changed the diagram a lot because we started and we had like, okay, this is the plan. Started testing and some things felt frustrating, so we kept like adjusting it. But the one thing that was like it cancels almost any animation. The only one that doesn't is when you get hit. So if you're in the middle of like a getting hit animation, that won't necessarily cancel it. That is a dodge.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're attacking, if you're like jumping, you're gonna dodge your way out of that. Like the dodge has to be intentional the moment that the player wants to do.
Mm-hmm. And speaking about kind of the like being able to like get out of the way or being stuck in animations, we mentioned hit stun on the enemy earlier. Can the player's character get hit stun? Because as anyone who's played a beat 'em up has ran into that situation where you have like 2 or 3 enemies punching and they're just staggered enough that the player or the character gets like stun locked and you lose a life unless you use like a special or heavy move to get out of the way.
They can get stun locked, and a lot of the hit reactions do apply to the players too. So you can get stunned, you can like fall to the floor, you can be launched. But all of them are tuned down compared to the enemy. So we're like player focused, we're player bias, I guess. So like if an enemy would get hit stop for 8 frames, a player would get it for 2. It's just like that feeling, and then they release. We were very focused on getting the players in control of their characters as soon as physically possible, without losing the feel of the attack. Because we didn't want, for example, if an elite enemy hits you with a very powerful attack, and you can kind of just brush it off and run immediately. It takes that feeling away too. So it was a lot of balancing, and again, the coaching being very oriented on making things as iterative as possible. I cannot like possibly say how important the code team like iteration process and communication was for this project. So like we actually had this, we did a game in Unity. So like in the inspector where we edited all of the information, there was the frames. Like for us to set exactly how many frames each attack had of hit stop, like what exactly hit reaction for that attack, and which hitbox would create that hit attack. So while the larger hitbox that like the right things are the explosions would flinch you a little bit, the inner one could stagger you, and like all of these things were really easy to control for us in the design team, and we took our time doing it. We tried it multiple ways, and we like tuned that balance of so on that like, getting stuck thing. We tuned so that the light attack of the enemy has such a short recovery time for the player that you can actually dodge away, even if there's 2 of them attacking you.
Mm-hmm.
And we also controlled how many enemies can be attacking you at the same time, and we can change that per enemy group because we have horde type of enemies. So there's like little robots that just swarm you,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to attack a whole bunch of them at once to be effective. They don't stagger you because otherwise it would be impossible to do anything. And they can only attack you from they are one of the ones that can hit the most amount of enemies at the player at the same time. So they can hit like 5 swarm enemies can hit you together, while only 1 elite can hit you. And they actually take that possibility away from each other. So if there's 1 elite hitting you, you won't be getting swarmed. and that changes really fast, so it doesn't feel like the enemies are silly. It doesn't feel like they are just standing like, let's wait for this combat to unravel and get our turn. Like, they switch a lot, but we still have control over it.
Does the aggressiveness or number of enemies change or scale based on the number of players currently playing?
Yes. The attack tokens that allow enemies to fight certain amount of enemies and to fight each individual player, it's different. So each player has their own targeting situation. So if only one elite can target one player, 4 elites can target the 4 players separately. And we also scaled their HP. We didn't want to make the damage necessarily bigger or the reaction and aggressiveness necessarily different, because we felt like changing the timings of attacks would punish the players looking for mastery. So if they played in normal difficulty and then they changed to hard difficulty, we don't want them to feel like they have to relearn the timings of the attacks. But they might be more impactful, or the enemies might be a bit more tanky and you need more people attacking them at the same time. More enemies could swarm you. Like we can control how many enemies spawn per amount of players. So while for one player you can face 3 enemies for the same combat, for 4 might have 8.
All right. And one thing that we didn't discuss yet, that I do want to spend a few minutes on, and like I said, as a quick time check, we just went over about an hour in the recording, so I would say maybe, again, 15, 20 minutes. Like I said, I'm trying to resist the urge just to, not, geek out about action beam up design for the next 2 to 3 hours, because I have other work I need to get done, I'm sure you do as well.
That makes 2 of us, because as I said, it's the first time that we can actually discuss this game openly, and it's so fun.
I guess to kind of move this conversation a little bit forward, in terms of combat design, we didn't talk about the characters themselves yet. We've mentioned, of course, again, the basic kit, what you have access to. In terms of character design and characterizations, what has been the approach in terms of building the different characters, making them different, but still, again, fitting within the grand scheme of the game?
So the first thing was what we already mentioned, the common core of actions, and that expectation of if I press this button this way, something will happen. So they all share this common ground that players could switch from, but their uniqueness was where everything started to get that's my favorite part of the game. And we currently have for the base game, the funded the first funded project part of the Kickstarter, we have 7 characters, 2 mystery ones that we are not going to share early in the process, but 4 available for the entire public, and 1 Kickstarter exclusive. That is Sharuk, and I'll talk about him too. So I worked a lot with the other designers on the team, and we essentially delved into fighting games. We went to Street Fighter and Tekken, and we just started getting what are their differences, and weapons and Brawlhalla and the characters on Smash Bros. And we found this many wiki pages and even the games pages themselves categorizing their classes and archetypes. And we organized all this information, chopped off things that didn't really make sense for the beat 'em up gender, so we were adjusting a lot of this information and changing a bit what some of them mean for the context, and then fitting those classes and archetypes for each character. So the classes and archetypes were 2 separate things, because it was a lot about what abilities they have and their play style. So for the player, how do they feel, and the character, what is that doing? What's the character doing? And I'll talk about the 5 ones that we have public already. So it's Valhalla, the tank, Sarge, the all-around kind of fighter, Kumbaya, our support, which was something that we discussed a lot if it really fit in the beat 'em up, and we tested a few ideas, and we feel like she really complements the group. And we had Sarge, Valhalla, Kumbaya, and Kali, our assassin. And we also have Sharuk, that is a different kind of assassin because we changed his archetype. So essentially, the tank character, all characters also have shields, and they're also part of their base kit. But they change more. They are a little bit less like all characters have a light attack. So Valhalla's shield is bigger and can protect more people, while most people have a 1% 360 shield. So you're trying a lot to be there with your friends and protecting them, while like oscillating with big attacks. So there's many characters that I could quote, but I think one of the ones that really inspired me was Overwatch's Reinhardt. And then we changed a lot of things because, again, very, very different game. But this principle of I'm there with everyone, and I'm giving space to people. I'm gaining space. And while Kali is an in and out character, she has a lot of mobility, and her dash is different. Her special abilities, all characters have their own special abilities, are very focused on approaching fast and leaving fast. I'm going to quote another inspiration for her from a different game too, but her main inspiration for me was Cerulean from Vermintide 2. So she has the Shade specialization with disappearing and appearing and getting more attacks for that, like rogues from Dungeons and Dragons, this kind of principle of I'm not that defensive, my shield doesn't last too long, I don't have a lot of health, but if I get in the fight, I'm killing everyone there. And this kind of in out, she's very strong against elite enemies because of that. Because sure, they don't get staggered, but she can run before they can actually attack you. And then Kumbaya, our healer support character, that is also a berserker. She's this cute little mouse that protects everyone on her base form. So she can heal you, and her fighting style can heal people around you. While her ultimate ability is that she gets really, really angry and she rages. So she is a barbarian from Dungeons and Dragons. If I would be fully inspired by that, of course there was other references and adaptations, but then she starts getting space. So she's a little bit of crowd control with a lot of healing. And last, Sarge, he is a fighter on his core. He's the leader of the team, and we wanted to represent that by every position you put him in, he can kind of get out of it and do a good job from it. So he has a very strong close combat while being able to get a little bit of distance. So he is a more rounded character that is easy to pick up while still being very effective. And Sharuk, while Kali is in, out, quick attack, come back, he is a little bit more durable than her, and he can take more hits, but he's still focusing on one character. So he's dealing a good amount of damage, not as much as Kali would, but he's more playing around and moving around the combat instead of trying to get away from it. And all of these things we're very encouraged, we like them a lot, but we want to make the community very, very part of the process. And the Kickstarter and our Discord, we want them to test eventually when we do release a demo. We want their feedback too. So all of these things will be changed with player feedback and adjusted for the final game. We're just leaving pre-production. We're still probably going to be a little bit in pre-production once if the Kickstarter gets funded, because we do want to hear the players a lot on this and what they want to play.
And with the I'm looking at the Kickstarter, so a few of the stretch goals is to add in more characters to the game as well. With again, obviously we're recording this in the middle of the Kickstarter, so we can't talk about future plans and all that. But what if it does succeed, or what's kind of the idea to expand the team? What's going to be the approach to say this character is different from this character? How are you building that, in terms of your character designs?
So it's harder to trim the amount of ideas we had than actually have new ideas. For each of those classes and archetypes, I have at least 15 described items that we can combine, and they create really unique gameplay styles. And like, not getting too many details, to not like bring spoilers and those kind of things. We want to have a brawler character that is also tanky, but instead of like taking space for the team, he jumps in and it's more like a dive strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Or a more like explosive character, so very focused on like AoEs and like jumping in, exploding, go back. Or other kind of supports that are not focused on healing. So a summoner that can like create. Summoner might be the wrong word. I think it would best be an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
They can create things to help the team without necessarily like directly healing. And I have a lot of cool ideas, and we do want to bring them to the players. So even though we have characters that are pre-planned, we also want to have input from the players and see, as I said, what they want to play with. So from this group of classes and archetypes that we're going to mix, we do want to like bring votes and hear the players that are playing the demo or that just read through and really want like, oh, I really wanted a character that explodes a lot and have a lot of like area movements, and like we really want to hear that.
All right. And I guess to clarify for people watching, in an actual full game, is like each character kind of like locked when someone chooses, or can like 4 people pick like the same exact character and play like the game like that?
So the principle, as we are in a pre-production right now, each like you lock the character, but we do want to hear players there too. So if 4 people really want to play as Kali, and we keep hearing that feedback of like, that's my favorite character, but that's also my best friend's favorite character, and we want to play like together, we are willing to change that and adjust to the players. But as it is right now, you lock the characters.
Before we kind of get to like talking a little bit more, like to kind of like wrap things up, we'll talk a little bit more about like the Kickstarter plans, etc. I guess one question, in terms of the aesthetics, we haven't mentioned like the art or anything about how the game looks for Project Bubblegum. Was like, obviously for people watching, I'll have links to the store page or links to the Kickstarter, they'll be able to view things like that. What was kind of the approach of the art team in terms of how they wanted the aesthetics of the game to look and feel?
So we could maybe consider our team specific conversation later with different people, but I can definitely give an introduction.
Okay.
So even the name Project Bubblegum, the name of the project, how the studio name projects is very trying to give the feel in the first word. So this like light pink and very colorful and very like everyone kind of feeling for bubblegum, and like things like bubblegum leagues, they're like this entry level of things, is where we started with. And we have this amazing concept artist. His name is Yusuf. And this started with essentially his art style. And he makes a lot of this like animal characters that looks like adorable and really interesting. And that's how the visuals started, but it went through a lot of iterations, including on, sure, it's cute, but how cute and how like what age are we targeting? Because we had this whole exploration of like hit attacks and how to kill enemies, because they are this like, I find the enemies in the game adorable, even if they're less adorable than the players. And if we want to be a family game and a friends game that doesn't really have like a strong like only teens mark, how do we make this without like dismemberment and blood splatters and all these things? And so like this balance of, we want to make it very responsive and very satisfying and not kid exclusive, but we still want to make it very approachable for different ages and something that parents could play with their like 10-year-olds together. We landed on this like really cutesy but like very tech and spacey and this like futuristic thing with a lot of like each region, because there is a few planets in the game. Oh my god. I'm so sorry for this.
Oh.
And I get so there is this like each region and different planets, and we wanted to show a lot of like characters, including one of the tiers on the Kickstarter is make your pet into an NPC. So we want to have this place like towns with a lot of the NPCs just like hanging around and talking and like just doing things together, or maybe they like there is this like pirate group, or to show a lot of this like diversity of our galaxy, and while keeping this very like light-hearted feel to it. So everything is very colorful. We didn't go into chibis, but this like very cartoonish feel to it. So big eyes, very like they're animals, all like ears and like little animal things for each of them. So like Kali is a cat. Kali can just like scratch people with one of their attacks. So this kind of thing of making the theme of the entire game lighthearted, but also like full of little details that people can enjoy. Did that answer the question?
I think so. Good amount, and I'll be posting like images or footage from the Kickstarter trailer during our conversation as well, so people can certainly see all this in action there. But before we kind of talk more or kind of wrap things up with the actual Kickstarter and the plans for it, anything else from a action design, game design standpoint that makes Project Bubblegum special that we did not touch on?
I think we touched on a lot of the points that I really love about this game. But I feel like for me, what was both most enjoyable of everything that I played and designed for Bubblegum is this combination of a few genres that was like a lot of the times a problem for us, that we had to make a lot of decisions that were very, but this genre does this and this genre does that, which fits this game specifically. But the combination of the environment with the combat, and how like jumping around and moving and having like this line of sight situations and what enemies can reach you and cannot reach you, and even like puzzly parts of combat. So some areas might be blocked and you might have to do some things to like get to some areas or get to safety, and moving things around can create safe spaces for you. Feel this like really diverse combat is the most special thing for me in the game.
Oh, and speaking about puzzle and kind of that kind of design, like puzzle and the platforming, we talked earlier about the challenge of keeping things, keeping the readability on screen, kind of keeping things going with 4 players. What kind of like, again, like obviously you don't want to go into full spoilers, but what has been like kind of the thought process on like the puzzling and the platforming in terms of making sure that feels good by the fact that you can have up to 4 players, so you don't want to make anything that you get completely stuck on, so you have like 3 players sitting around while one person just does the whole thing themselves, kind of gameplay.
Oh yeah, that was, again, I'm gonna repeat that so many times, but a lot of iteration. We are all game devs that really, really love a whole bunch of different games. So when we think platformer, a lot of us think Ori, and like the platform elements of Metroidvania, like Hollow Knight, and all this like detail things, and Super Meat Boy, and this really like precise things that a lot of players found really challenging, and we didn't want to go there. We love it. We really appreciate these games, but we had to like find balance between all the mechanics. So the platforming is not like a challenging, super precise thing for the game. We wanted to give a lot of forgiveness, so there is a lot of player assist in some things, and like it's mostly about how many different things you can do in the environment. Normally a beat 'em up, even though you can jump, is mostly for attacks. This one you have to jump, you have to move around, and there's gonna be parts like combat moments that you have to be jumping and reaching different surfaces. While there's gonna be combat breaks and like action breaks that you're moving around and having this like very jump moment, and the camera entered on that question because it expands until a certain level. and that led to a lot of like kind of one area experiences for a lot of the puzzles and the combat and the platforming, because you can be moving, and if you move and like you get stuck, you just like respawn with a little bit less health, so it's not like you died. Too bad. But it's still like can be frustrating to get stuck. So a lot of those things were focused on like how far can your camera go? If people start dying, what happens to them? And like if the first player reaches the final point, what happens to the ones that got behind? And how can we like facilitate some of these things? As a younger sibling myself that played a lot of Mario with my sister, I was always the one falling in the pits and becoming a little bubble and moving towards her. And like we don't want the bubble approach where you're just like not in control anymore. But having this kind of forgiveness that allow you to not succeed in every situation, but if your group succeeds, you are closer to succeed, was important for us.
And to clarify, when someone's playing Project Bubblegum, do you have is it going to be based on like a live system, like every character has like, or every player has like 3 lives when they enter a level, or is it just a case of when everyone gets knocked out, game over or restart?
Everyone gets knocked out. Game over. Like not even game over. You you have to go out of the level and start the level again. You don't lose the entire game.
Okay.
Because like the main reason why that's the case is that you can revive your friends.
Yep.
So you went out of lives, you're 0 HP, like you're in a really bad position, you can get healed, and you can like everyone. That's why if you look at the character sheets, every character has at least 1 point in support, because they can always bring their friends back.
All right. And one other question before I forget, and then we'll move on to the Kickstarter. In terms of difficulty, we've been talking again about the overall aesthetics and tone of this game being designed for like anyone and everyone to be able to play. Or is there going to be like different difficulty settings? Like, is there going to be like the super challenging one, easy, normal, medium, hard, etc.?
Like as I mentioned, the pre-production situation. Like at first, at least on this like initial release, we want one difficulty that allows you to excel in things. So if you're really looking for like time perfect and animation cancel and this like super complex combat, you can like do a no hit run with all this like perfect timings, and you're just calculating how much does the enemy like actually hit you. You have room for that. But if you're going to struggle a little bit and you're gonna die sometimes and you're gonna like pressing a few buttons, you can still get to the end even as a single player. And that's the goal. This balanced, like with room for improvement, but accessible to the like average player, for like an average the average player kind of experience. And later on we can include like a super hard mode, like New Game Plus and those kind of things, but that's not planned for the initial release.
All right. So, with that, again, we can certainly keep chatting about this game forever and ever. I do want to wrap things up and talk a little bit more about the Kickstarter and kind of like what are the plans surrounding it. So again, for people watching this recorded right now, we are doing this right at the end of January. The Kickstarter is still in full swing. And again, you'll find links to that down below. So if you enjoy what you've been hearing about Project Bubblegum, be sure to check that out and send some donations their way. So, to kind of like, I guess like kind of like a little bit of a rapid fire questions for you, Gabi, about the Kickstarter. The first one is, what was kind of like was the plan for the studio to go to Kickstarter with Project Bubblegum, or did that come about during like pre-production and the early development?
It came about during pre-production and the early development. As we mentioned, we tried to get in the Kickstarter video, we tried to get publishers interested in the game, but as beat 'em ups and like this couch co-op, even if it's online experience, is not the most popular genre right now. We received a lot of meetings that I was really confident about. Like, oh, we love the game, it's so beautiful, like it's so like it's really responsive, we like this. And then just like, oh, it's too niche, we cannot like make sure that players want it. And so it was this like tough moment for us. I was like, okay, we're not sure if players want it, let's try it. Let's bring them to the players. And we started on a kind of a like surprise drop of the Kickstarter. We didn't do a lot of like pre-selling of the idea. And our current idea is to ramp it up and have like more things like this. That again, thank you so much for this opportunity to like talk about the game, and we are ramping up our social medias and like increasing the activity while we go. And we're hoping for the best. We know that it's a big ask, and like we couldn't make the game with a different ask, and we don't want to like pretend like we could. We really want to be honest and open with other players through the entire process, and this kind of money is what we will need to keep our team to make this game and release on early access on December.
All right. In terms of, I guess, like preparations for the Kickstarter, this is something that I always like to ask like any developers when they go to the platform. What was kind of like the planning that went into getting the Kickstarter ready for the studio?
So our first step was to think what was like the range of the project. So we knew that like all our craziest dreams would be great, but we needed a solid base, a solid plan that included the essential, what it needs for you to understand the story from A to B, and experience the entire mechanics and the enemies that we were planning and the environment. Like, what is the minimum idea that gets everything that we want across, and this game, like, make this game exist as we intended it. And we honor the people that actually like backed on like this is the full product with the base. So that was the first step. And then we are all very, very passionate about this game. So we essentially just gathered and started writing the things that we love and going through we started with a very like small Kickstarter page that was very focused. And then we okay, we want to give them more information. We want to talk more about the game, so let's increase it and let's like post updates about it later. We're gonna post a combat update soon and like show more of the game. So we went through like all our concept art, what we could show, and wrote like a lot of things about the game, and then started trimming. As I mentioned, it's easier to create things than it is to trim. And then we thought about the rewards, and it was a very big question for us if we wanted to do physical rewards. And that was a whole crazy rabbit hole because we were researching how to ship across the world and how much it would cost and what we wanted to do and how much it would cost to do these things. Would it be possible to do these things? The plushies, the posters, and we got the plan ready. Then we got everyone from the company. We divided into the social media groups, plan who would be posting what and how we're going to keep in communication. So, for example, I'm not even social media platforms in general. Like I'm on the Steam group and on the TikTok group, and like a lot of designers on the Discord group and on the like Twitter group. So we divided these groups and like divide and conquer. Started posting. We trying to get the word around the word around. And yeah, that was the preparation. Social plan and rewards.
And as you were mentioning the rewards, one thing I wanted to bring up for people watching, you also have a 3D figurines as part of like your some of the higher up tiers as well.
And the plushies, which is something that I love very much. They got very cute.
And as you were describing the challenges of like physical releases, physical production, again, I've had discussions with developers over the past decade about it. It is, if you do not plan for it, it is a horrible nightmare in terms of logistics and getting it going. So again, like for any developers watching this, again, like the biggest tip I've heard, which I'm sure you probably will agree with, do your research. You know, cross your T's, dot your I's, make sure you looked at every single aspect of physical fulfillment, what's the amount cost at the factory level, shipping. Shipping is, the greatest curse word when it comes to physical goods.
God, I was like one entire day after I researched a lot, and like this is general for me. Like read everything, go dig things, and Kickstarter has a great support for that. Like to talk about backer kit and pledge manager and the easy ship, which are things that really, really help. Because I'm a game designer. I had idea that these things happen, but I wasn't necessarily like this person that knows about the structure and those kind of things. So it was a lot of us researching a lot, days and nights of like figuring out how to do these things. And I like opened this shipping thing and I figured out the size of the box that it would require. I was like measuring things, getting placeholder plushies and getting everything in the box and making sure like, okay, we can send this. It can be a good box. It's not going to like look unprofessional or going to damage any of the products. And on top of that, let's go to the entire list. I looked how much it costs to ship things to Zimbabwe, to Australia, to Brazil, to Europe, to Mexico. We went like through countries. Okay, this is the biggest box, the envelope, just a sticker pack. It was a whole journey to get this ready.
Yes, and I've done like basic physical, like I did some basic physical awards here for my channel, and yes, when you start learning about shipping rates at different countries and customs and having to deal with that, it becomes a very I guess fun could be a word to describe it process.
And it results on you late night being like, how do I ship things to Zimbabwe if we need to ship things there?
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, this box, this is and like comparing everything. It definitely is a crazy ride.
Mm-hmm. Now, to get back to the Kickstarter, one thing that I wanted to ask you about, because it's something that is always comes up when we talk about video game projects on Kickstarter, is having some kind of demo or early build for people to check out. And for people watching us right now, are there any plans while the Kickstarter is up and running to have some kind of playable build, early teaser, demo, pre-alpha, whatever, for someone to like look at the game?
Yes, we do have the plan for that to show it. And as I mentioned, like we want to stream the level that we have, and we are considering the best way to release this demo right now. And we're gonna give updates on the page on our social media. So if you guys want to follow there, and you don't even have to back it right now. If you want to like wait, you could like the project and you get the update. And like we do want to show more of the gameplay itself.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think with that, anything else regarding the... Oh, I guess you may have mentioned this earlier, but just to clarify, if the Kickstarter does succeed, does it still have any timetables for when Project Bubblegum will be released?
Yes, the plan for the early access is limited part of the story, but the full character, like the full core loop happening.
Mm-hmm.
So the early access would be the end of the December of this year, so like end of the year. It's also visible on the Kickstarter, so you can see that you would get the game key this December.
All right. And before we kind of go into our final wrap up for the discussion, anything else regarding the Kickstarter goals, tiers, challenges of it? Anything else that you would like to mention?
I guess like we have been like discovering a lot about how to get a Kickstarter around, and how to talk to a lot of people about it, and it's definitely something that is good to research. We did research and we had limited like time frames that we could do this thing, but like community, as much as you can talk to your community and create a community and be open and honest, that has really, really worked for us.
All right. So, with that, again, we could certainly be chatting here for many more hours. And yeah, the invite is definitely open for you, for anyone else from Emerald City to come back on in the future to talk about either this game or just general design.
That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So, to wrap things up for our discussion then, for people listening to this, as another point to clarify, obviously Project Bubblegum is going to be for PC. Are you, or is the studio aiming for any other platforms for the game?
We are aiming to release PC first, a little bit later Xbox and PlayStation, and we do want to later release for Switch, but that will take a little bit more time for this like game to be released there.
All right. I think with that again is all my questions for right now. I definitely want to thank you as well as Eric for coming on. It's been a fantastic conversation, and I always say this to developers, definitely best of luck with the Kickstarter campaign.
Thank you so much, and it has been great to be able to talk about the game, and thank you so much for offering the opportunity for us. amazing. Thank you.
Not a problem. In terms of social media, I'll include links to stuff down below, but if there's anything you want to mention in terms of sites, Twitter, Blue Sky, Facebook, TikTok, whatever, feel free.
We have a lot of social media presence right now. So your preferred platform, currently we have Instagram, Twitter, Discord, TikTok, Reddit, the page of the game, YouTube with like videos of the game, and like, yeah, just reach out to us. It's on our website, it's on the Kickstarter. You can just click and join our social media and talk to us.
All right, sounds good. So, I guess my final point for you, Gabi, to end things on, do you have anything you'd like to say to fans watching? Any final thoughts on the project or what's been going on with it? Like, just something to take us out on.
Sure. First of all, I want to thank everyone that is watching this. And if there's backers here, like, thank you so much. It's so, like, the comments that we have been having on the game and everything that has been happening has been really reassuring, and it's lovely to hear what you guys think. And, like, go check out, please, if you haven't yet. And I do hope that's something that you find interesting and you feel like you could be playing with your friends or even by yourself. And thank you so much for the time that it takes to check this.
All right, sounds great. And, one other point I just want to clarify, because I know someone's going to ask this in the comments down below. You mentioned it will have, of course, like remote play, couch co-op. Are there plans for an actual, like, dedicated online play for Project Bubblegum, or will it just be a couch or local?
There will be online gameplay for it. We don't want to release it exclusively local, and we know there's many possibilities, like the Steam Play Together and the Parsec, but we wanted to have an in-game online possibility.
I just want to mention that because I know whenever we talk about co-op games, that is a major point I'm sure someone would have asked down below. Alright, yeah. But I think with that, Gabi, again, we can certainly chat for many more hours, but we will end things here for tonight. So, for the people watching, again, for my social media stuff, do the YouTubing stuff, check out our Discord, my Patreon for our game recommendation newsletter, buy all the books that I have. I still have to do one on beam up and action design, so that will happen at some point in the future. And as I said at the start, if you are a developer working on a game, upcoming release, or just out, or just want to talk design, reach out to me. I am always happy to have guests on. So, again, Gabi, thank you for hanging out with me this afternoon, and I hope to hear good news about Project Bubblegum in the future.
Thank you.
All right. Not a problem. So with that, everyone, have a great rest of your night, and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where you examine the art and science of games. Until next time, take care.